Hi, everyone. Welcome to Jasmine's First Impression Sports Talk. And today we have a great show for you in store with my amazing guests, my father and Jeremiah. So let's get started.
Welcome to Jasmine Pollock's First Impression Sports Talk, the fastest growing sports talk show in the country. And now, here's your host, Jasmine Pollock.
Welcome back, everyone, to Jasmine's First Impression Sports Talk. And the first topic of the night is injuries in football and what the future of football looks like. So just before we get started with this conversation, we want to run a clip for you guys pertaining to Brett Favre, Hall of Famer Brett Favre, talking about concussion protocols and why we need to transfer into no tackling football. So let's get into that clip.
Mom, Dad, let's talk about tackle football. I just learned about CTE, the brain disease caused by repeated hits to the head. The more years I play, the more I'm at risk. If you put me in tackle today...
By the time I'm a senior in high school, I'll have played 13 years of tackle football. I could already have CTE, and it will continue to destroy my brain even after I stop playing. So by the time I'm your age...
I could be fighting depression, struggling to keep my thoughts straight. I could become violent, even towards my own children. When I'm your age, what will matter to me is not my youth football career, but that, like you, I'm a great parent and I can provide for my family.
So please, keep me out of tackle football until I'm 14.
So, Dad, I want to start with you when it comes to the future of tackle football. What do you think is going to happen now that we are waiting till 14 or that promotion of that video? What's going to happen in the future with football?
Well, in my opinion, one of the biggest observations with that is basically football. You have people who are very passionate about football. Obviously, it's your number one American sport, and the problem is you have to it's kind of hard to take the physicality out of a game that was founded on physicality. And I do understand where the parents are coming from, or where Brett Favre is coming from, as far as the potential for the brain injuries, which I think a lot of the rules that they've implemented, especially in NFL and in college, will help a lot of that. But I do think at a point it's still football. So people are going to have to figure out where they're willing to compromise in that area, because that's just the nature of the sport. Now, I do think with the new programs they have now for, underage kids, like the 7-on-7 leagues, a lot of these camps where these kids are not even, there's no pass, it's just out, doing drills, running routes. I do think that that's going to revolutionize the game and actually ultimately change the game in the future. Because before, you couldn't have football on several different platforms like AAU, softball, or basketball. But with these 7-on-7, with the reduction of injuries, now you have these camps everywhere. And I actually have a friend of mine whose son's doing very well in those particular camps, and they're getting a lot of recognition, from actual colleges or whatever else, from football, where they're not even running pass. Now, that affects the skill position, I believe, more than like offensive linemen and different things like that. But I do think that that's an effective way to kind of minimize the amount of, collisions, and then, of course, with some of the rules.
So, Jeremiah, what do you think about these 7-on-7 tournaments going on? What do you think that entails for the future of football?
Well, when it comes to the 7-on-7, I feel like it's such a great way for these athletes to kind of play off of just using their kind of IQ and just plus with their body and feet. I feel like when it comes to 7-on-7, more than you thinking of tackling is more of you making kind of the right plays when it comes to receiver, or when it comes to defending for the defensive backs or the cornerbacks and other things that's like that, to kind of get a mindset when it comes to that. But at the same time, Jasmine, I think that when it comes to children when they're a little bit younger and like getting into little leagues and certain things like that, I do feel as sometimes there should be tackling. But I think, as Mr. Pollock just said, about certain rules that go with it. Because imagine of a certain a young player just waiting all the way to 14 years old. First of all, when they get into a certain kind of landscape, especially when they're about to maybe go into high school and everything else, the type of physicality, like you can't really prepare them for that if you get them all the way to 14 and then they just start getting hit. You got to build their masculinity. You got to build their drive for, trying to get over certain things. Because I know they're not going to be used to those type of things. Like when it came to me, I didn't start football until I got into high school. I wasn't used to the tackling and everything else. It wasn't type of my love thing for it and everything else. You have to build up that type of grid, that type of, I can get up out of this stuff. Because just imagine a 14-year-old or 15-year-old going through their first hit. You get the wind blown out of you. Some can take it, some cannot. And I just feel like you need to get them used to those type of things. But also, I feel like there needs to be rules to protect those type of things, especially in the little leagues, so those type of issues don't happen when it comes to any head injuries or just injuries itself.
I agree. I think it's very important that you have a certain level of protection for young athletes like that, because at a young age their brains are so little. And if you are playing tackle football, that I agree with that commercial that Brett Favre did, because wait till they get to a certain age to be more physical. But I think as you rise in the rankings in playing little league football, I know for me, I've had head injuries myself in softball. I got hit right in the head, right here in the forehead by a softball, and I'm fine so far. But things like that are very serious, and you want to make sure you take that very seriously. But speaking of rules, Dad, I want to go back to you when you were talking about rules of the game. When you look at college football now, you see a lot of the guys get ejected for certain plays, like head to head. Maybe they don't mean to be intentional with some of those targeting plays, but do you agree with some of those rules?
No, I don't agree with the rules from the simple fact. Well, here, let me say it like this. So, as far as those rules go, now we're trying to split hairs on full speed football. Okay, so if a person is running full speed to collide with another player, and that is, I mean, tackling techniques or whatever you want to call it, it's really difficult to play any of those types of positions, safety, linebacker, or whatever, and not hit. That's what you're born and bred to do. That's what you're built to do. That's what you're coached to do. And these flags are getting called, and these guys are getting ejected without even the full story. So basically, you'll see a guy clearly get hit by a shoulder, but that's not. We're seeing it on replay. In the full speed of the game, the ref's looking at it as, boom, he just got hit. And even when they go back to replay it, some of those guys are still getting ejected because, oh, it was a shot to the head. And if you look at it, a lot of times when those receivers catch the ball, or the offensive player, I should say, has the ball, and they turn around to brace for the hit, they scrunch down and their head is usually in the way at that point, because that is the number one thing. You try to protect yourself, but then it gets seen as targeting or whatever else. And I just think that in that sport, I mean, you can do the best you can, but you're going to always have a level of physicality with football, because that is the nature of it's just like baseball. It's like, hey, we're going to start playing baseball with Nerf balls, or playing baseball with plastic bats. It won't work, because that's not the nature of the game. So, and that's basically it with that.
So Jeremiah, what do you think pertaining to that, far as the physicality of the game and these guys getting called for targeting? Do you think that the rules are fair, and do you think that we are making it softer, would you say?
I would say in somewhat that we are making it soft. Don't get me wrong, because certain players actually do be targeting when it comes to their intentions, when it comes to a lot of things. But at many times, I feel like they're getting out of hand with these flags when it comes to the targeting rule. You have so many of these players; they go off of their adrenaline, and their momentum just takes them. Just imagine, like on the play, a quarterback passes to a slant, but you already see the middleman already coming up, and he can't really stop himself in time, and he's already going at a full speed and stuff. And I just feel like when it comes to those plays at itself, they're not intentional. And I feel like, the refs should go a little bit easier on those calls instead of, ejecting, because at certain points, those things, the players don't really mean that well when it comes to those type of things. Like, they don't mean to injure that person or mean to be coming in that fast, but they're just doing what the football play is, and just getting there before the person is supposed to get there, and making the hit, and actually making their coach happy and everything else. But I just feel like they need to go a little bit lighter on that. But I do understand their kind of issue when it comes to the targeting, especially even when it comes to the quarterback as well.
I agree with that, and I think that the targeting plays are so. Some of the plays, now you do have dirty players who do things intentionally to hurt the offensive player. That happens all the time. But I feel that there are athletes that, really just love the game of football, and they just want to make the right play to, stop a down or stop the player from going upfield. And I think it's hurtful to see some of your best players get injured, and then you have some of your best players get ejected, very good players. But we're going to wrap this up, and we're going to head to the next segment about officiating. So we'll be right back here on Jasmine's First Impression Sports Talk after the break.
Water. It's everywhere. We drink it, we bathe with it, we cook with it. Coffee's made with water. Toilets won't flush without it. It's used for washing clothes, dishes, utensils, pots, pans, floors, and our teeth. Plants and crops need water, animals drink it, and fish need it too. And don't forget, we can have a lot of fun in the water. Water. What will we do without it? You're watching Jasmine Pollock's First Impression Sports Talk. Stay in touch with Jasmine on her social media channels to see videos, featured guest interviews, and much more. Find Jasmine on LinkedIn by searching Jasmine Pollock. On Instagram, it's at GameSpace_sports. And you can find Jasmine on YouTube by searching GameSpace Sports Content. First Impression Sports Talk airs each Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can see the show live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. If you missed the live show, we have you covered. A recorded version is always available on social media. And now, back to more First Impression Sports Talk.
Welcome back, everyone, to Jasmine's First Impression Sports Talk. I'm here with my guest, Jeremiah Nixon, and my father, Johnny Pollock. So back to officiating. So this is the new segment we're going to head into. Jeremiah, which league do you think has the worst officiating currently right now, the NFL or the NBA?
I would say the NBA for right now. The reason for it, I say the NBA is because of, I would say, the officiating and when it comes to the players. There's too many times that I see different type of technicals that I would see, like so many of the frustration when it comes to after games, when it comes to the fans, and just not liking the way that the certain games go because of certain things that's like that. Either if you make a certain play, if you talk to your coach or say a curse word, a certain thing, it's really the level of sensitiveness that they just would throw a technical on you, or just penalize you just for the smallest things. But I do give the NBA credit when it comes to fixing certain rules when it came to actually the refereeing when it comes to players when they force themselves to draw fouls. Like you'll know, like the James Harden, the Dwayne Wade, when they do the step back and then pump fake and then make you lean into you to make you foul them, or how Trae Young goes around certain screens and then hits like a certain stop and then shoot a shot. Like, I'm glad they do those type of rules so it doesn't seem so sensitive, like, and it can actually get back to the aggression that it used to be. certain times, especially during in Michael Jordan days in the early 2000s and stuff, these guys were brawling and a lot of different things, not just in meaning with fighting, but they was going after each other, and there wasn't many fouls called when it came to certain things because it was just the competitiveness, the aggression. That's the things that us fans and everybody would love, and even the players, because it's the certain drive and everything else. And I think it needs to get back to that.
I agree 100%. Being that you mentioned Michael Jordan in the 90s, Dad, you watched all of those NBA games. You watched all of those leagues that happened back then in the 90s. So, Dad, what do you think about officiating NBA now and how it needs to change?
Well, my number one problem with the officiating in the NBA is simply because it's I wouldn't say it's soft. I just think that the NBA it's like almost like wrestling. There's a lot of falling back where guys are not even touching each other. And a foul that I just do not care for is the foul when a jump shooter goes up into a defender and they call the foul on that. That makes no sense when the shooter actually initiates the contact. Um, and with a game that has a smaller arena, you would think the replay system, they would get a lot more of those calls correct, because some of those calls do influence the flow of the game. And I think they need to really look at that, especially. And I think that certain flop fouls should be penalized with certain fines because it can change the game based on a person's floppiness become an act. And now that flopping's been around forever, but it seems like it's even more now. And also, the step back shot that James Harden does. I think that should be outlawed. I think that should be considered traveling because you got to think about it. When you're creating a shot, if you can step back and create an extra 2-3 feet from a step back, how is that a fair advantage for a guy who can actually shoot anyway? Now, I think you should have to be able to create your shot off the dribble and go up and make your shot, not be able to step back to add extra space without putting the ball on the ground or the floor, I mean. So that's just a few things, and it's too many divas, too many inconsistencies because some referees allow the players to play hard, some of them don't. Now that can be said for the NFL as well, but as far as basketball, it is night to night. You will see it. It's like, what are we doing? What's a flagrant? What's not a flagrant? This person, it's just too much, and they need to really trim that down or utilize their replay for what it's intended for.
I agree, but we do see a lot of times in the NFL where there has been some egregious plays where players just like, why was that not called? For example, when the Saints and Rams playing the NFC Championship game, we clearly saw that was a personal foul on that defender. I forgot the defender's name, but that could have officials put the game in their hands. But you never want to see that. You always want to see what team can come up or overcome coming down like that. So that was very unfortunate. However, I do agree with both of you that the NBA, I think, has the worst officiating because when you look at it, compared to early 2000s, like you said, Jeremiah, in the 90s, a lot of those guys you could defend. Like the people were defending. There were serious defenders back then. Not saying there aren't serious defenders now, but that's why even though I'm not the biggest fan of Patrick Beverley, but what the intensity he brings to the game is something that the game needs, and him being aggressive, him being like that, not too aggressive, but he can't get overboard. But we love to see days it's like you're catering to the shooter. And that, like you said, you're talking about James Harden doing the step back, and you're just like, that should be traveling. I didn't even think about that because it's like, you're trying to create space and, get the defender off of his balance and you make a shot. And then as you do the step back, you can go into the defender. It's not fair. So I think with that, that needs to change. And also there's a lot of ticky-tack calls. Like, if you slap someone's hand while they're going for a layup, that shouldn't be a foul. That's you. If you miss the layup, you just miss the layup. Like you see all the time, like, when you see Embiid go for a layup and a guy taps him, it's a foul. He's bigger than the other guy. I mean, if you didn't make the layup, you just didn't make the layup. But I feel like there are some egregious plays. There's some serious plays that do need to be, looked at. But as you said, the officiating needs to be a lot better. And then the instant replay, being that the arena is small, being that you're able to, see it right then and there, and the fans even see it in the arena, you should go back and look at those plays and say, hey, this is what needs to change. But do you guys think that, being that we're in the era of shooting, I'll start with you, Jeremiah, being that we're in the era of shooting, do you think that has a lot to do with, a lot of these plays being ticky-tack, a lot of these, officials going back? And do you think we'll ever go back to that era of playing that tough basketball that we once seen in the early 2000s and in the 90s?
Well, when it comes to that, Jasmine, I mean, it's gonna be so rare because right now today, there's only a small percentage of a true center, a big man. That was the type of dominance that was just like Shaq, throw it down, or like the other ones that just came before, Tim Duncan and stuff, that didn't have to rely just so much on shooting as many times. And everybody and their mom, they want to be behind the 3-point line, And my dad always tell all the time, get your big butt inside the paint, post up, and do what you came there to do. Especially with a big height like that, and how much they could be a dominance and everything else. Because I know after, when it became, like I say, the 2010s and everything, when it came to after 2013 and 14, when it became such Golden State that everybody wanted to mimic that. Oh, we got to have shooting. Even when it came to even stars and everything, it's like nobody wants to pick up 3-pointers on free agency. It's mostly like, we just have these guys, we're going to just teach them how to shoot 3-pointers, when you can't do that each and every time. Everybody has to play a certain position, because I feel like a point guard should play a point guard, shooting guard, a power forward, and a center. You play your position. I don't think that such a power forward, only a small percentage, as mostly a LeBron or maybe a KD or Carmelo, that can has those good percentages from the line, but not everybody can actually do that, because I just say you have to play your position and play your role.
Right, I agree. And if you notice, the past two championships, Milwaukee Bucks and the Lakers, they were not good 3-point shooting teams. So, Dad, do you think that, being that these two teams, is it now like, okay, we're taking a step back from the 3, or the 3 is not as important, since these last two teams, who are not good 3-point shooting teams, won the championship?
Well, just to kind of piggyback on what Jeremiah was saying about that in the 3-point shot, you can just look at the anatomy of it, the physical makeup of a lot of the guys coming into the league. You're not really seeing these big bruising Shaqs or guys like that in the league as much as you did in the past, because it's going more to a finesse type game. I remember the era of Akeem Olajuwon and Alonzo Mourning, and when those guys were down there, the post up was really serious and a big deal, and it was an art, because it was an inside out game back then. And I really think that teams who stick to that formula, even in this shooting era, teams that sell out to, and I think the team you can think of as the Spurs were probably the closest thing to that old school style, where they play inside out, big man that can score high percentages and, but stay around the basket. I think that those teams, if they sell out to that, will still be the most effective teams in the league, because those shots inside the paint, those shots in the, in that mid-range area, are a higher percentage shot than threes. When threes are falling, don't get me wrong, it's a great thing, but I think that efficiency over the period of the game, or the duration of the game, will outweigh the amount of 3-pointers you can shoot, because it's only so many 3-pointers you're going to make in a game, but there's no premium that can be put on layups and hook shots and different things like that, mid-range jump shots. And I think that the teams that get back into that style of play will find themselves winning more than not. Rotating the ball is probably one of the biggest arts. Golden State did do a good job of that. But when you rotate that ball, you put pressure on the defense and you extend your possession. So I think that that's a big deal as well, is the teams that follow up with those fundamentals usually do well, and I think will do well. So I would like to see some big men come back in, some big bruisers in the league one day again. So.
And I agree with that. And I feel that, when we see Gianna, she could give us hope for that, going in the paint, even Embiid. But I'd rather see big men in the paint rather than shoot threes. But that wraps up tonight's show. Thank you, Dad, Johnny Pollock, and thank you, Jeremiah Nixon, for being here and having this great conversation about, NBA and NFL officiating and, the future of NFL or football in general and injuries. So I thank you guys so much for joining me. Thank you, Jay, for giving us the opportunity to see those clips. Yes, of course. Thank you to the audience for tuning in and showing your support. And we'll see you guys here on Jasmine's First Impression Sports Talk on Mondays at 8 p.m. See you guys next time.